body cameras worn by police officers while on active duty. The ICE officers who were involved in the killing of Alex Pretty, it is being reported that some of them, at least, were wearing body cameras, and there is no guarantee that that body cam footage is going to be available to an independent investigation. And it is true that around the world where police officers have body cams as part of standard operating procedure, more often than not, when there is an incident involving police officers, which incident puts the police in a bad light, there's an unexplained technical failure which renders the footage unavailable for scrutiny. That aside, the South African Police Service was supposed to start having body-worn cameras in April of 2025. Parliament was assured by the Police Ministry that the body camera rollout would begin then. So we are now 9 months beyond that. There has been no formal update to either lawmakers or the public, and the body rollout has not begun. Criminologist Dr. Guy Lamb joins us now. Guy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, John, and good afternoon to your listeners.
I mean, how important is a body camera?
Well, a body camera is really important in a democracy, in particular when you have policing that needs to be accountable to the people, needs to be accountable to taxpayers, needs to be accountable to Parliament. So it kind of creates transparency and accountability. It's a really useful technology to do that. But it also not only protects the police, but also can show where the police have not necessarily obeyed the law or violated the law or broken the law. So it can work in both ways. So that's the theory, but in practice, as you have said in your introduction, it's often far from that ideal.
And why would there be a delay in the rollout of these cameras? I mean, how does one assess that? I don't know if you have any insights, but if you don't, your speculation is going to be more informed than mine.
It's purely speculation because we haven't given a lot of details about this particular project. It's been piloted in some cities, for example, but this is, we need to understand that the police are big in South Africa. They have more than 1,000 police stations, more than 100,000 police officials out there. Rolling out something like this with this sort of technology requires time, resources, training. You need to have all the logistics and backup systems in place. So I assume that's one of the main reasons for it, is they haven't got their systems and technology sorted out yet. A second one is around there is always resistance in the police to change and reform. And so there probably is a lot of feet dragging happening because, the police are quite resistant to that kind of change, but also resistant to being monitored. And so that's I think possibly what we're seeing as well. The world over, police behave in this particular way. They don't necessarily like to be monitored through these sort of technologies.
Are they expensive? I mean, might resourcing from a financial point of view be an issue?
I mean, possibly. I mean, it's not only just the cameras. One needs the whole back-end system here. So you need to, obviously, the cameras aren't that expensive, but you need to be able to have the servers to manage that particular information, that particular data. You need to have backup systems in place. And when there's, 100,000 police officers walking around with body cameras, that's a lot of storage that's required. So, probably you've got some CETA state IT issues at play there. Because if we just look at, for example, the reform of the Central Firearm Registry that deals just with firearms at a much smaller scale, and there's been massive delays around that due to these kind of technical issues, due to these logistical issues. So I think that's probably come into play in a big way.
But even accepting that it's likely to happen in South Africa what happens in other policing jurisdictions where body cameras are worn, that the bad actors are going to give you a wide-eyed look of innocence and say, unfortunately, my body camera wasn't working. But surely the majority of police, is the majority of police officers decent, law-abiding people who want to bring justice and safety to the people of South Africa? But you'd expect them to agitate because they would want the body camera footage to prove that they're doing things the right way. Or am I being incredibly naive, Guy?
I mean, it's so difficult to tell. I mean, the problem is we don't really have there's really no study where that exists. I mean, I looked at the North American data recently, and there really isn't a comprehensive study to say these things make a difference in a variety of contexts. There just isn't good enough data or studies on that, unfortunately. I think most police in South Africa, are join the police because it's a calling. They want to make a difference. But the problem is we have quite a sort of punitive culture within the police. And there's this thing around if you put a foot wrong, that there are quite serious consequences for you. So I think there would probably be concern from a lot of police around if footage is out there, and the moment they make a decision based on what information they have available to them, and then they're worried that they may be held against them later on in terms of promotions. So I sort of the sense of this concern about there will be negative consequences, and that's the police culture, unfortunately.
And, of course, police culture very much under scrutiny, both in Parliament and at the Maqlanga Commission, and the scrutiny is revealing some very, very ugly, well, I was going to say spots, but it's more than spots. It's an entire canvas which is stained the same colour. And, yeah, I mean, and they're just dealing with so much infighting and incompetence, and the police minister saying we don't have the capacity to deal with gang violence, to expect them to successfully and competently and honestly run a tender and then a rollout of body cameras is perhaps asking too much of a police force in serious decline.
I mean, it's both yes and no. I mean, I think this could make a difference. I think the important point for the taxpayer is that the police pay a lot in terms of civil liabilities every year. We're going into the hundreds of millions here. And what body-worn cameras can do is potentially reduce that particular liability. So it can sort of save money if we're looking at it from a sort of an accountant's point of view. I think that already is kind of an important motivation here. But I also think it's the sense of if the police want to build trust with people, and that's the problem. We have very low levels of trust in the police. One way of doing it is through greater transparency, and the kind of cameras can do that. But unfortunately, we've seen through Maqlanga, we've seen through that committee that there are problems around procurement. And there's been a history of corruption within the police because they have a massive procurement budget. So I think the rollout is important that it happens, but it does need to go through proper scrutiny.
Guy, I don't know how much attention your academic work allows you to pay to the two inquiries into Lieutenant General Nkwanzi's allegations. But the last time we spoke about it, I think, was around the time that they stopped working as we headed into the madness of the festive season. But do you have any clearer sense of whether what is being uncovered is going to be positive for the police force in the future? Or you don't have a lot of hair, sorry, perhaps I shouldn't have said that, but you're tearing the rest of it out as, just what's been happening with Sonono at Maqlanga and what he's been saying and the allegations that, whatever his name is, Nkwanzi was prepared to hold off on murder investigations into Kat Matlala if Kat Matlala helped him bust Shadrack Sibiya, and just that constant drip feed of these terrible allegations. What are you feeling about it at the moment?
Well, I mean, it's still not looking positive. We sort of haven't really got much clarity. It's gotten murkier, in fact. Lots of mudslinging going on, lots of efforts to try and undermine each other, lots of backstabbing going on. So unfortunately, it doesn't increase one's sort of sense of confidence within the police. It really is kind of a process of undermining confidence in the police, and it really sort of shows that there are major factional battles going on. It's become highly politicized. It's good for this, I suppose, this kind of information to come out there so we can see how big the problem is. But we can't really see ourselves clear of the murkiness at the moment, and it's just, as I say, getting murkier by the day.
That it is. Dr. Guy Lamb, thank you very much indeed, a criminologist based at Stellenbosch University. I'd feel better if police on active duty had body-worn cameras, because I don't believe that every police officer is corrupt. I think we potentially have a greater percentage of corrupt officers in our force than in other forces across the democratic globe. But, yeah, I mean, I don't expect body-worn cameras to fix police brutality, to fix police criminality, but I do think it would make a positive difference. Oh, I hope the rollout starts and is successfully concluded before too much longer.